The wedding wasn't supposed to happen, not like this. Not to a man like Silas, who couldn't even meet a woman's gaze without stammering, and certainly not in a chapel made of driftwood and bone. But the bride was already waiting, taller than the doorframe, a veil like mist draped over her face. And when she spoke those 5 strange words, his stomach wasn't the only thing that growled. Before we dive in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if slow burn stories with strange hearts and stranger love interest you, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's tale takes place on the other side of the canyon, where a preacher vanishes before sunrise and leaves behind only his hat. Silas Boone wasn't the kind of man who got letters. Not from family, not from friends, and certainly not from women. He lived on the edge of forgotten country, where the wind carried more rumors than truth and the sun didn't set so much as surrender. So when the post rider dropped a single envelope onto his porch, no stamp, no return address, just his name carved into what looked like tanned hide, he didn't know whether to open it or burn it. He held it in both hands like it might twitch. The material wasn't paper. It flexed wrong. It bent like skin and smelled faintly of salt and something older, bone dust or dried flowers. He ran his thumb over the name. Silas Boone. Etched so precisely it felt branded. His heart thumped harder than it had in weeks. Loneliness did that, sometimes made even strange things feel like hope in disguise. Inside was a single sheet, the same odd material, folded once. The message was short. The bride is ready. Come hungry. There was no signature, just a hand-drawn map on the back. A trail he didn't recognize. A chapel marked with a red X in the center of nowhere. And yet, he knew it was real. Silas set the letter down and stared at it like it might explain itself. The house was too quiet. The kettle didn't whistle. The clock didn't tick. Something in the air had shifted, thickened, like the first second before a storm breaks open. He didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his bed, turning the letter over again and again in his calloused hands. He thought about the last time someone had touched him without flinching. Couldn't recall the year. Maybe that was answer enough. By morning, he'd packed. He left behind the things that wouldn't be needed. His ledger, his spare boots, the lock he never used. In his saddlebag, he placed the letter, a clean shirt, and the last photo of his mother already faded at the edges. He saddled up his mule and started toward the sun, though the map told him to ride west. As he passed the edge of town, no one noticed him leave. The saloon hadn't opened yet, and the preacher was still asleep in his cot behind the mission house. Silas didn't expect anyone to miss him. Not really. By nightfall, the road was gone. Only scrub and cracked earth remained, and the stars came out brighter than he'd ever seen them. He followed the map like it was scripture, each turn and landmark strangely familiar, like he'd dreamed them once as a child. Then he saw it, the chapel, crooked and bleached white by years of sun, tucked between 2 dead mesquite trees. A faint light flickered inside, and on the porch, tall enough to brush the eaves with her veil, stood a woman waiting. She didn't move, didn't wave, just watched him approach with the stillness of something ancient. Silas swallowed. He was hungrier than he'd realized. She stood so still. Silas thought she might have been carved from stone, or bone, or something older. Her veil caught the faint wind like a net trying to hold the dusk, and the chapel behind her looked too small to contain someone her size. She had to duck slightly just to pass beneath the lintel when the door opened. Silas stopped at the bottom of the steps, unsure if this was close enough or not nearly enough. "Silas Boone," she said. Her voice was low, but it traveled across dirt, across silence, across the strange beat of his heart. "You came." He tried to speak, but his mouth was dry. Her veil fluttered, but he still couldn't make out her face. Only her size, easily 7 feet, maybe more. Not gangly or awkward, built, like a statue left too long in the desert wind. Her shoulders were broad beneath layers of fabric that shimmered like river rock, and her hands folded gently in front of her looked like they could lift a wagon axle without strain. He started. "You sent the letter? I set the table," she said simply. Then, after a pause, "And I've waited long enough." He didn't understand what she meant. Not yet, but there was no malice in her voice. No seduction either. Just something heavy and true, like church bells you could feel in your chest. He looked past her to the door, which swung wider on its own. The inside of the chapel glowed with amber light. Candles, dozens of them, filled the rafters and ledges like fireflies caught mid-prayer. There were no pews, just a long wooden table down the center, set for 2. Silverware, fine china, crystal goblets all mismatched but shining. On each plate sat a folded napkin and a sprig of something green and fresh, impossibly fresh for the desert. Silas stepped onto the porch, half expecting the wood to creak beneath her weight. It didn't. She moved beside him, towering, but not imposing, and gestured for him to enter first. The inside smelled of rosemary and roasted meat. He paused just over the threshold, taking it in. The air felt thick but not suffocating, warm but not hot, like stepping into memory. The table was already laden with food: stews, breads, roasted vegetables, something dark and glistening with glaze. He didn't recognize half of it. Everything looked too vibrant, like food drawn by a dreamer. His stomach growled before he even sat down. She moved to the other end of the table, lifted her veil, and folded it gently beside her plate. Silas couldn't see her face, yet the candlelight played tricks, but her voice pulled him back. "I hope you're hungry, Silas Saturday." "I think I might be," he said quietly. But that didn't explain why his hands were shaking. He wasn't sure when the food started disappearing. One moment, the table was full, a feast fit for a wedding or a wake, and the next, his plate was clean, his fork resting loose in his hand. Silas blinked, stomach full in a way he hadn't felt in years, not just satisfied, nourished. Down to the bone. The bride sat across from him, watching with eyes he still couldn't see, not clearly. The candlelight painted her in fragments, a cheekbone here, a shadowed jawline there. She didn't touch her food, didn't drink from the goblet at her elbow. Her hands stayed folded in her lap. "You ate well," she said. Not praise, just observation. Silas swallowed, unsure what to say. "It was incredible." She nodded once. "That's good. You'll need your strength." The words landed strange, somewhere between kindness and warning. Silas shifted in his chair. The weight in his stomach was starting to spread, not as pain, but as heat. A warmth moving up his ribs, into his arms, making his fingers tingle. He opened his mouth to ask what was happening, but her chair scraped back. "Come with me." She stood, taller than before. Or maybe he was shorter now. She reached out a hand. Not commanding, not pleading, just offering. Silas hesitated, then placed his hand in hers. It was warm, calloused, steady. She led him past the altar, a crude slab of cedar hung with ribbons and dried herbs, and toward the back of the chapel where a door stood slightly ajar. It hadn't been there before, he was certain. But then again, he hadn't seen the table either, or the candles, or her. Behind the door was a room no bigger than a storage closet. Except it wasn't. The walls were hung with veils, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, in every shade of white and ivory. Some frayed, some new, all lightly swaying as if breathing. She released his hand and stepped inside. From a low wooden chest, she lifted a bundle wrapped in velvet and placed it on a narrow bench. Carefully, she unwrapped it to reveal a set of gold rings, some dulled, some polished. She chose one, held it between two fingers like a coin meant to be flipped. "Do you accept?" she asked. Silas blinked. "Accept what?" Her head tilted, just enough for her veil to slip and show a corner of her smile. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't sweet either. Just real. The bond, the hunger, me. The heat in his limbs throbbed, steady and low. His heartbeat had changed tempo, no longer anxious, but matching something older. He looked at the ring. It was carved with tiny glyphs, wheat stalks, animal tracks, a crescent moon. "I don't even know your name," he said. "You will," she whispered, and then she slid the ring onto his finger. The ring didn't feel cold. It should have. Gold usually did, but as it slipped over Silas's knuckle, it warmed instantly, like it belonged there, like it had been waiting. He stared at it, expecting some immediate transformation, some bolt of understanding. But nothing happened. No lightning, no sudden clarity, just the faint hum beneath his skin, low and steady, like the echo of a bell you don't remember hearing. The bride didn't say anything more. She wrapped the remaining rings back in velvet and returned them to the chest as if she hadn't just married a stranger in a room of breathing veils. When she turned back to him, her face was in shadow again. "Rest now," she said. "Tomorrow, we begin." He didn't ask what they were beginning. He should have. She led him through another hallway, longer this time. Though the chapel didn't look large enough to contain such a passage, the walls changed as they walked, from wood to stone to something else, a kind of polished black that reflected nothing. At the end, a door opened into a room that smelled of lavender and smoke. A bed was made, clean linens, a pitcher of water. a folded set of clothes he didn't recognize. "Your room," she said. For now. He wanted to ask for how long, but his tongue felt thick. The fullness from the meal hadn't faded. In fact, it had deepened. Not just fullness. Wait. He sat on the edge of the bed and felt it groan beneath him. His hands trembled as he pulled off his boots. The bride watched silently, then turned and left, her veil trailing behind her like fog. The door didn't latch when it closed, but it stayed shut. Sleep came hard and strange. He dreamed of tables that stretched for miles, of hands not cruel, not kind, passing him plate after plate. Meats he couldn't name, roots still coated in dirt, eggs as large as his fist. He ate and ate and ate until his belly split, and still they fed him. He should have screamed, but the only sound he made was chewing. When he woke, it was still dark. But the darkness wasn't empty. It was thick, watching, and on the table beside his bed, another meal. Not breakfast, something heavier, spiced and steaming, as if it had just been placed there. He sat up slowly, his body aching like he'd spent the night rebuilding fences. His clothes no longer fit quite right. The sleeves of his shirt felt tighter across the shoulders. His boots pinched in strange places. He should have been afraid, but the hunger had returned, and so he ate, every bite. Alone, by the third day, Silas stopped questioning the food. He still didn't know where it came from. Each morning it appeared hot, fresh, perfectly seasoned, and always more than one man could reasonably eat. Yet he did. Every bite. Without thinking. Without regret. Hunger became the first and last thing he felt each day, and in between there was only quiet. No chores, no orders, just long silences and the distant sounds of wind curling around chapel stone. The bride came and went. Sometimes he would find her in the hallway, veiled, humming a tune he couldn't name but felt like something his mother used to sing when no one else was around. Other times, he'd glance up from a plate to see her watching from the shadows, her gaze steady but unreadable. She never interrupted, never urged, only watched like a farmer watches for signs in the soil. By now, his clothes no longer fit. His shirt split open at the back one morning as he tried to dress. His boots he couldn't even get on. And when he caught his reflection faint, wavering in a bowl of water, he saw something broader, denser. His hands had thickened, his forearms corded with unfamiliar strength. But it wasn't just size. He felt different inside, less brittle. One afternoon, she joined him at the table for the first time. Not to eat, just to sit. Neither of them spoke for a long while. He chewed slowly, the meat tender and flavored with something floral and deep. She rested her chin on her hand, veil still drawn. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. "Does it frighten you?" Silas paused, mid-bite. "What? This place? Me? The change?" He considered the question. It should have frightened him. All of it. The chapel that shifted shape, the meals that appeared from nowhere, the way his body no longer obeyed the same rules. But when he looked at her even through the veil, he didn't feel fear. He felt seen. "I was more afraid before I came," he said after a moment. "Out there." She nodded, almost sadly. "Most are," he set his fork down. "How long have you been here?" "A long time," she said, then added, "but not always alone." There was something in her voice then, something brittle, and barely veiled. Loss. She looked away as if to hide it, but not before he caught the shimmer of light against her cheek. Not sweat, not candlelight, a tear. Silas surprised himself by reaching for her hand. She let him. Her fingers curled over his, gentle and sure. "You were the first to stay past the third day," she said. He didn't ask how many hadn't. The sun dipped lower, casting honey-colored light through the stained glass. For the first time since arriving, Silas didn't feel like prey or a guest. He felt wanted, not for his hunger, but for something older, quieter, and deeper than he expected. The storm came without warning. One minute the sky was dry and brittle, the color of old parchment, and the next, black clouds rolled in like a herd at full stampede. The wind screamed through the chapel's crooked bell tower, rattling every window, slamming shutters like fists on wood. Silas stood by the door, shirtless and sweating, watching as lightning split the sky in jagged, bone-colored streaks. Behind him, the bride moved with calm. She didn't flinch, didn't rush, just closed the inner doors and lit 2 thick candles with a single match. "It won't touch us in here," she said. "How do you know?" "I built this place from my own ribs," she answered. Silas turned slowly. You mean, not with my hands, she said. With my life. He didn't speak. The silence between them stretched, heavy with thunder and memory. Then she crossed the room, veil pulled back partway, revealing the edge of her jaw sharp, noble, and too perfect for any woman he'd ever met. Her skin had a faint shimmer to it, like moonlight trapped in flesh. She sat on the bench beside the hearth and motioned for him to sit across from her. I was once small, she said. Like you. Like all of them. Silas lowered himself onto the bench, arms resting on his thighs. He was larger now, his shoulders nearly as wide as hers, his breath heavier. But he still felt small as he listened. I came here with my mother, she continued. Long ago, before the chapel, before the maps forgot this place. We were hungry, and something old found us something deep in the land. Silas felt the hair rise along his arms. It offered us a choice. Take nothing, and leave. Or stay, and be fed. Fed well. Fed forever. She smiled, but there was no joy in it. My mother left. I stayed. And the food? Silas asked, his voice quieter now. She tilted her head. It grows from sacrifice, from story, from presence. The land feeds those who feed it. He felt a chill then. Not fear exactly, but awe. The kind that made your bones ache with understanding. Is that what I am? He asked. A story to be fed? She leaned forward, her hand brushing his. You're more than that. You're the first one who hasn't tried to escape before the fourth night. Who hasn't screamed when the doors disappear. They disappear? They do, she said. For the ones who don't belong. Lightning cracked, illuminating her face fully for the first time. She was beautiful, but not in any way Silas could compare. Her beauty was the kind that trees had, or mountains. Older, earned. What happens to me? He asked. If I stay, you grow, she said. Like I did. Like the chapel did. And if I leave, you shrink, she said simply. Until the world forgets you again. The storm howled outside. Inside, they listened to each other breathe, two beings caught between hunger and hope. Silas stopped feeling hunger by the end of the week. Not because he wasn't eating, he still cleared every plate, but because hunger had turned into something else. A need, yes, but deeper. Rooted. Like the way trees need sunlight, or rivers need slope. He no longer felt the ache in his belly. He felt it in his bones. His frame changed first. He noticed it when he bent to pick up a drop spoon and his knees didn't creak the way they used to. His back stayed straight. His muscles didn't groan. The aches that had followed him since his 30s quiet companions he'd made peace with were gone. Replaced by something quiet, strong, living inside him. By the 9th day, he ducked beneath doorways without thinking. By the 10th, his voice carried differently lower, steadier, like it belonged to someone who'd stopped asking questions and started becoming an answer. The bride watched it all with silent approval. She didn't praise him. She didn't coddle. She simply remained always nearby, always present. When he asked her name, she said it would come to him when he was ready. When he asked how long the transformation would take, she said it already had. One morning, he woke to find his old clothes gone. In their place, a robe, stitched from the same pale fibers as the chapel walls. It fit perfectly. When he ran his hand along the seam, he felt something hum beneath the fabric, like a heartbeat that wasn't quite his. He looked at himself in the mirror above the wash basin. He didn't recognize the man staring back. The face was his, but not as he remembered it. Sharper, larger, wiser. His eyes glinted with something more than light memory, maybe, or promise. His shoulders filled the glass. His hands had thickened, knuckles like knots in old oak. He touched the ring on his finger. It no longer looked small. Later that day, the bride led him out the chapel's side door, one he hadn't seen before. They walked down a narrow path carved into red rock, where wind moved like breath through the stone. The trail ended at a wide overlook. Below, stretched out in impossible beauty, was the desert, but not as he remembered it. Not cracked and lifeless. Green, vibrant fields stretched where there should have been sand. Vines climbed pillars of ancient stone. Water glinted in channels that ran like veins across the land. This place was dead before you, she said quietly. He turned to her. I didn't do this. You are doing this. Every day you stay, the land drinks from you. From your story, from your choice. He stared down at the miracle below. Is that what happened to you? He asked. She nodded once. And if I leave? He said, though his voice faltered. She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because he already knew. He wouldn't. They came at dusk. 3 riders, shapes against the dying sun. The sound of hooves crunching dry gravel like bones underfoot. Silas saw them from the overlook first, distant, slow-moving figures coalescing from the horizon haze. For a moment, he thought they were memories, ghosts conjured by the land. But no, the dust they kicked up was real. So were the glints of metal and the scent of sweat that followed them. The bride was already waiting when Silas returned to the chapel steps. They answered the call, she said. Not angry, not surprised. Silas felt something tighten behind his ribs. Like I did? She didn't look at him. Not like you, but yes. The riders dismounted with practiced ease. 3 men lean, sun-worn, armed with more confidence than sense. Each carried something Silas recognized from his own former life. A rifle too clean, boots too new. The kind of swagger that came from being the loudest man in a silent town. The lead rider stepped forward. Younger than Silas, sharper in jaw but duller in eyes. We got your letter, he said. All 3 of us. Came quicker than you expected, huh? The bride said nothing. Which one of us gets you? The second asked, licking dry lips. Or do we all take turns? Silas felt heat crawl up the back of his neck. Not jealousy, protectiveness, the kind that wrapped itself around bone. You don't understand, he said, stepping between them and her. Oh? The third man said, resting a hand on his belt knife. And who are you, the doorman? Silas stood straighter. He didn't need a weapon. His body was one now. I'm her husband. The men laughed, loud and bitter. Don't see a ring on her finger, the first scoffed. She doesn't need one, Silas said. The land wears it. They looked at each other like he was mad. Maybe he was. But he didn't care. Not anymore. The bride stepped beside him. Not behind. Beside. She called to all of you, Silas said, quieter now. But only one stayed. Only one fed the land. You're saying this is a test? The second man asked, eyebrows rising. I'm saying it already ended. The sky darkened suddenly unnaturally. Shadows lengthened where they shouldn't. A wind picked up, carrying the scent of bloodroot and ash. The chapel's windows lit from within. Even though no one had touched flame, the men hesitated, then turned. They didn't run, not quite, but they left fast, without looking back. The horses bucked as if the air itself had turned sour. Silas watched until they disappeared into the dusk. He turned to the bride, heart still pounding. You invited them too. She didn't deny it. The land is always searching for what it needs. And me? You're the only one who listened. The silence that followed was vast, full of meaning, full of choice. And for the first time, Silas understood just how rare belonging really was. The next morning, the chapel bell rang for the first time. Silas hadn't known it could ring. He'd never seen a rope, never heard even a whisper of metal from the steeple. But now it tolled once, twice, a deep and hollow sound that shook the earth beneath his feet and sent the birds fleeing the nearby cliffs. The bride stood in the doorway, silhouetted by gold morning light. It's time, she said. For what? To pay. He followed her in silence, through the chapel's central aisle, now longer than it had been before, lined with rows of candles where there had once been none. The altar was bare, save for a wooden basin carved into the shape of open hands. Water shimmered within, clear, still, deep enough to drown in. She turned to him, veil pulled back now, revealing her whole face. It was beautiful, not just for its symmetry or the calm strength in her eyes, but for the weight it carried, the centuries she'd borne, the losses, the hunger that had once ruled her, and the discipline she had grown from it. A face not of a bride, but of a keeper. Marriage is a covenant, she said softly, and covenants require blood. Silas didn't flinch. Mine? She shook her head. Yours was already given. With every bite, with every dream you fed this land, you were sowing yourself into it. He looked down at his hands. They were no longer his, larger, darker, etched faintly with veins of gold that shimmered beneath the skin like roots drinking sunlight. You've changed, she continued. But the land doesn't just take, it remembers. And now, it gives. To whom? He asked. She stepped aside. The water in the basin rippled. Shapes formed within it, blurry, distant, like looking through smoke. He saw a woman's face, pale, lined, then a child's, then another. Dozens, maybe hundreds. People scattered across the desert like seeds, their stories unfinished, their needs unmet. They're waiting, she said, for what the land can offer them. And what am I? Silas asked, voice low. You're the new keeper, she said. Like I was. Like those before me. He staggered back a step. I thought I was your husband, she smiled, not cruelly, not kindly, just truthfully. You are, and more. You belong to me, but also to them. He turned to the door. It was closed now, though he hadn't heard it shut. The windows had frosted at the edges. The light outside was no longer morning. It was forever. So this is it, he whispered. No, she said, placing a hand on his chest. This is beginning. And from somewhere beneath the chapel floor, he felt it. The hum of roots growing faster than thought, wrapping around his spine, threading through his blood. Not prison, purpose, his body no longer his alone. He had become part of the land, and the land had debts to settle. Time moved differently after that. Days bled into one another, golden and slow, marked not by clocks but by change. The land pulsed beneath Silas's feet now, not metaphorically, but truly. He could feel it, like blood through a vein, like breath beneath ribs, and with each sunrise, he felt more rooted. The chapel expanded without hands. Rooms formed where there had been only blank walls. The hallways grew longer, the doors thicker. A small orchard sprouted behind the northern eaves, fruiting within days. The altar glowed at night with a light that wasn't fire and wasn't man-made. Silas woke earlier now. He no longer needed sleep like he used to. When he closed his eyes, it wasn't to rest, it was to listen. To the roots, to the air, to the quiet murmurs of those still wandering the edge of the desert, trying to find something worth staying for. The bride came to him less often, not out of distance, but reverence. Her presence filled the chapel like scent fills a room, never loud, but unmistakable. When she did appear, it was always the same, veiled in mist and moonlight, her voice more felt than heard. I'm proud of you, she said once, pressing her forehead gently to his chest. You fed the land, and now you carry its hunger. He nodded. He understood now. Not all appetites are curses, some are callings. One evening, long after the storm and the suitors and the final meal, a child arrived at the chapel steps. No horse, no belongings, just dust in his hair and a hollow look in his eyes. Silas stepped out, robes trailing behind him like woven twilight, and crouched before the boy. Are you hungry? He asked. The child nodded. Silas took his hand. Inside, the table was already set. He never saw his own reflection anymore, not in glass, not in water, not in the candlelit dishes that bore endless food. But he didn't need to. He could feel what he'd become. The mass of him, the steadiness, the warmth he radiated when someone stepped inside afraid and left carrying something they didn't have a name for. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of night, he would stand by the chapel bell and look west, where the desert still stretched endless and unsolved, and he would wonder if there were others like him, grooms who stayed, who grew, who became keepers of a land that demanded more than labor. But mostly, he stayed quiet. He had no need for noise. His presence was enough. He rang the bell when the time came. He opened the door when they arrived. And when they asked what this place was, he would only smile, step aside, and say, I hope you're hungry.